All righty, guys. So today we have a guest. You may know him as Howard. You may know him as the Condo Man. Howard, thank you for coming on the show.
Pleasure, Jordan.
So Howard is a previous realtor, now a developer. I don't think you do. You still do transactions, or do you have a
I do.
team?
Yeah,
Okay, you do.
I do. I have a team. I still do transactions myself, but certainly less than what I used to.
But your primary focus is now development.
Yeah, my primary focus is marketing and selling my own development and developing my own developments.
Perfect. So I think this is going to be very useful to the viewers. One of the questions I get on the in the comment section very often is, can you have a developer on to speak about the process and the changes that we're seeing in the space? So I think it'll help if you kind of set the stage and give the viewers a quick 2-minute synopsis on who you are, where you came from, how you got into real estate, and how you transitioned from realtor to developer.
Sure. So I describe myself as an OG. I've been in this industry now for almost 25 years. And when I first got into it, there weren't a lot of young realtors. There weren't a lot of realtors, period. It was mostly old fuddy-duddies, in suits. Condominiums had just started to come up again. And, I wanted to position myself. I wanted to be a little bit different. I lived in a condo. I kind of, I always liked superheroes. So I was like, I'm Howard the Condo Man. So I started selling condos. I never sold dry cleaners. I never sold places in the suburbs at all at the beginning. I entirely sold condos. I branded myself that way. I learned about condos. And in the course of about 20 years, between development sales and resale sales, I had sold more than 2,000.
Right.
I started a brokerage about 15 years ago, Condoman Realty. And I always knew that this was very, 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 very hard work. Being a busy buyer's agent is one of the most difficult things that I think anyone can do. You're on call all the time. People are changing their minds. There's tons of ups and downs. And I knew that I wanted to take myself, taking what I've already built up, taking the skills I've already developed, take the knowledge that I've already developed, and put it into something else. And the next logical step was being a developer. I also like to move forward as much as I can with everything that I do and try my best. And to me, that seemed like the next logical step.
Right.
So I had wanted to get into development for a long time. I would say at least 5 years. I could tell you a story, but I won't because it'll get lengthy.
Sure.
So I had met with a few different builders. I had met with a bunch of different people. I wanted to understand developing. And everyone said the same thing. It costs a ton of money, in particular in soft costs that people don't factor in. And, they would go over the same calculations over and over again and talk about the soft cost. And in large part, it turned me off, except that I saw land values going up, up, up. I saw condo prices going up, 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 up. And I was still running around with clients all the time. So there was a site that was for sale for a long time. It's 1249 Queen East in Leslieville. Neelis had bought it originally and I guess tried to sell it as a building called Showcase. And then they redrew it into a building that had less empty space and a lot more square footage. And it was for sale for almost 6 months. Just at that point in time, the market was starting to turn where prices were jumping. And I decided it was a good time to buy a development site. Mm-hmm. That's where it started.
Beautiful. And I guess a good question would be, what do you see? You've been selling condos and developing condos for some time now. So what do you see for the long-term horizon in Toronto? Like, why do you choose to build here? Because obviously, realistically, you could build anywhere else in GTA in Southern Ontario. So why Toronto specifically?
Okay. So first, I have many philosophies, but one of my philosophies is you want to build on what you already have and what you already know. I already knew and still know the Toronto market. For me to go into a market right away, like let's say Calgary, or, people talk about the United States all the time. So let's say Texas. Frankly, I've been to Texas once. I don't know anything about Texas.
Correct.
I've been to the Calgary Stampede. I mean, other than that, what do I know about Calgary? Nothing. So Toronto, I have a brokerage. It's close to home. I understand the sale prices. I already had, a list of buyers. All that gives me an edge. It's almost like insider trading. That's illegal, but it's legal. It's like buying a condo yourself when you're an agent.
Mm-hmm.
you have the inside track and you understand stuff. So I wanted to parlay that into being a developer in Toronto. In the long term, would I consider somewhere else? Sure, if I felt comfortable and understood that area. I think you asked about the long-term prospects in Toronto. In the last almost 25 years, what I've seen is there's all these little micro factors that scare people and make them think that the market is going to change. But it's the macro factors that are really important. I'm going to tell a little story. In the middle of 2008, I saw an economist speak at a builder's launch. And the economist was like, I forecast the condo market in downtown Toronto to go up 6% over the course of this year. The same speaker spoke at the end of 2008 and said, I forecast the condominium market in the coming year to go down 7%. All that it showed me in that moment was that, number one, my experience and knowledge had taught me maybe something more specific than what economists do. But more than that, that it's not these micro changes that make the difference. It's the overall demand and supply. It's the overall demand and supply in any market. So at the end of 2008, in case someone watching this doesn't know, the condo prices bounced back and more. So they went down, what I would say was about 25% in 2 months, and they came back up about 30% the next 3. So by the beginning of 2009, prices were up instead of down, which was almost mind-blowing at the time. So it's the macro factors that really matter. Let's take today's market, for example. Everyone's scared interest rates go up once, interest rates will go up again. What am I seeing? Sure, people are definitely not buying as much. Demand is definitely lower, but it's very micro. The banks have the option to decrease their discount from prime or increase their discount from prime, however they feel. They also, together with the government, can lengthen amortizations. All kinds of things can still happen to shake down the market and bring it back to a more acceptable place in terms of interest rates and monthly payments. But even more important, the rental market has exploded. That's what I call the organic demand in Toronto. The demand to live here is still here, which I can see from the rental demand. Even if the demand in the short term for purchasing has dropped a little bit, it's still going to go back up because all these people who are renting are eventually going to turn back to buyers once they're no longer scared of interest rates. Lots of small things have happened, which has changed consumer perception. But on a larger scale, things like the Ukrainian war, which I don't want to make into a positive, but in a way, I think it has been a positive for Toronto because we accepted a lot of immigrants. Probably, we were more tolerant for sure than the States and probably most places in Canada. And in the short term, long term, that's going to help increase demand for housing. Toronto has got lots of industries. All these things in the long term help increase demand for housing. Mm-hmm. Of all the cities in North America, I still think that Toronto is top 3 for increases in prices, even though we've had classically the highest increase in prices.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you are seeing reurbanization of demand kind of radically right now. And that's really what's pushing rent prices to the moon. It's interesting to see it in real time, even clients of mine calling me up and saying, hey, we've been called back to the office 2-3 days a week, whatever the case is. And you're starting to see even on Fridays and Saturdays, like you look around and what recession, right? The city is as live as it's ever been. So what is, in your opinion, the biggest challenges you've faced in development? Is it the wait times, the development charges, the margins, acquiring the capital to build? Like what are the big hurdles for you?
So I'm going to try my best not to swear in answering this question. Okay. You really need to have a little bit of a death wish to become a new developer in Toronto, especially in the last 5 years. So I'm going to tell a little story, which I can tell lots of stories. I bought 1249 Queen almost 5 years ago now in August. I think on August 11th, it will be 5 years since I bought it. The building was drawn with the exact same density that I now have zoning for and finally site plan for. So literally, we've made no changes except some minor engineering changes in 5 years. I am not somebody who likes to waste time. It's not like I was sitting around, playing tiddlywinks, just waiting for the city to give me rezoning. I was paying an architect and I was paying an engineer, and I was trying to push to get comments back. So the first problem, it takes the city forever. And I'm sorry if maybe this will bite me with the city, but it's not a fair process. It's obscene to me that it would take 5 years to get the same building that I had originally applied for 5 years ago. At that time, there was a counselor who was trying to push. When I say at that time, I actually had applied for rezoning before I closed on that property. And there was a counselor who I think in October was trying to push to get engineering to give me rezoning in October 4.5 years ago. Since that time, there was 2 blackout periods because of elections where nothing happens. It's a complete stalemate. They change planners. I did change architects in all fairness at one time, but this is something that should have taken a year and a half. It was simple and there were no headaches. I could tell other stories, but to make a long story short, the city has just been horrible to deal with, and COVID has made them even worse. That's the first thing. Second thing, to say that this cost a lot of money is a gross understatement. I actually have 4 buildings, 2 buildings which are now under construction. One of them I carried for 5 years. Thankfully, it wasn't that expensive, and the interest costs were not that much. But the soft costs, the architect, the engineers, more architects. People want to change plans. You're paying the architects more. You pay the city. You pay for things. You're throwing out hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I mean that, without even thinking, without having super deep pockets. It's not even just stressful, it's wild. Anyways, I'm getting through it. I'm doing my best, and a saving grace, even though people may not like it, was that I was able to go back to people and increase prices. If I didn't do that, I would have lost my shirt at $12.49.
Right. And that's one of the things I tell people is, as a consumer, would you rather have a developer approach you and say, hey, look, this is going to go one of 2 ways. Either I can cancel the entire site, or with increased prices, I can still go through with it, provided those increased prices still come in under what they would pay in fair market today. It makes a whole lot of sense to fork over that money. And as a consumer myself, as a purchaser myself, I would rather have the option than just be told, oh, sorry, we're canceling the entire site. Right. And as far as zoning times, yeah, I think the study that was completed recently said we were the 34th slowest out of 35 OECD countries to approve new housing, which is just a startling number. It seems we're running on essentially a broken system.
I'm just going to comment on something you said. It was an ethical dilemma for me at first to go back to purchasers, and many of them were my own clients, and say, listen, I have to increase the price. Here are your options. I either increase everyone's prices, I don't build the building, or I go bankrupt. Those are the 3 choices. It was a real ethical dilemma for me to go back to people. I started doing all kinds of calculations where I figured I could make it back on another building. But at the end, this was the only option that was going to be good for everybody. People would have been more unhappy if I canceled the building. I would have certainly been more unhappy if I didn't cancel the building and didn't increase prices. It wouldn't have been fair to me. And the price increases that I came up with were more than fair. And it really is, for a small developer, the only way to have continued on with the project.
For sure. And I think we're going to see a wave of cancellations in the near future as a result of construction cost inflation and everything else over the past couple of years. And on the note of cost inflation, what do you think of the new increase in development charges, the 49% increase, as well as inclusionary zoning?
Okay, so first of all, on the cost increases, they are spread over until 2024, and they're not immediate. That's at least somewhat good. Right. The city does not understand supply and demand. They just don't grasp the general economic concept. There are 2 sides to supply and demand. One is demand, which is what they're always trying to work on the demand side. So they introduced the foreign buyer tax. Honestly, it was stupid as crap. There were almost no foreign buyers anyways. They all found a way around it. It did nothing. Then recently, they introduced no vacant houses, for extended period of time. Nobody even does
Yeah.
that here. That was more of a Vancouver thing. I mean, these are all, I'm sorry, very short-sighted, minor things. And then they have to do things to counteract what they do, or sometimes they just do things that counteract what they do because they don't understand that supply and demand can work with each other or against each other. It's the same thing with these adjustment costs. They're already high enough. It is expensive enough to develop here. It's expensive enough to buy here because it's so expensive to develop here. What's going to happen, the net effect of this is that they're weeding out small developers. They're only really giving the ability to larger developers. And if they think that there's a pricing problem, which there is a little bit, putting less supply into the market, which is what they're essentially, or lowering demand, which is what they're also essentially doing by raising prices, is certainly not going to help that. So if what they want is affordability, you know what? Work on the work on the supply end for a change. Let developers build a little bit more easily and a little bit more cheaply, and prices will become more affordable. I can speak for myself only. I'm not looking to make $1 billion. I'm just looking to make a reasonable profit margin and move forward. And I think that a lot of small developers feel the same way. The city needs to look at both angles, take a longer term perspective, and maybe look at supply for a change instead of these stupid little things that they keep trying to use to change demand.
I think, so some of the feedback I get from viewers sometimes is, well, the average pre-construction launch is coming 20% higher than existing resale prices. Do you really think that if fee structure was reduced, developers would pass along those savings to the consumer? And to them, I say, the reality is that developers they're not nonprofits. They have to make a certain minimum profit target just to build. And in a market like this, where we're seeing shifting sentiment and new condo launches not sell out on day one, you would see that pre-construction premium regress to something more like 5-10 years ago when it was only a 5 or 10% premium. And so those products would be far more digestible to less speculators and to more homeowners and end users, first-time buyers, right? What advice would you give new property investors or end users, people purchasing for themselves, looking into pre-construction? What should they look for other than just Condoman developments?
So, Jordan, I will say your content is great. And you've made lots of really, I think, on-point videos about pre-construction. So I think end users and investors do have to look for different things. So as an investor, one thing that I think it's very important that a lot of realtors miss, and I've been recommending even before I was a developer, price per square foot is a key to how much appreciation you can get, as is having efficient layouts, which I see you mentioning a lot. Efficient layouts are also key. So price per square foot. I love Tridel. I actually live in the Tridel building right now. I think they've done a great job of developing and building, and their customer service is great. And as an end user, I absolutely love Tridel. As an investor, at $1,600 a square foot or $1,700 a square foot, I don't know if the margin is there to make money necessarily. So that would be, as an investor, you have to look for both. I think you need to look for small, efficient layouts, which is key. A 420 square foot one bedroom, that has a window in the bedroom, that has somewhat of a living room, is incredible because it rents for the same price as a 600 square foot one bedroom that has an inefficient layout. Same thing goes for two bedrooms. So there's a little bit of an equation between price per square foot and efficiency of the floor plan. If you can get those two things, or if you can get a good compromise on those two things as an investor, I think you're winning from a renting point of view as well as from a resale point of view.
Right.
So that would be a big thing that I would look for as an investor. As an end user, honestly, I do think it's important to go to a reputable builder I think that's going to go a long way. You're going to get what you promised, and you're going to get quality. Uh, I can speak for myself as a small builder. I'm a bit unique in that I'll actually talk to purchasers if they need to, at least in the first two buildings. I'm much easier to contact, and I feel that will give more reliability, probably more trust for the purchaser, more confidence, which I will actually do in my buildings. But if it's a developer that you know nothing about and you know nothing about their product, as an end user, I think that's very, very risky in terms of what you're actually going to be delivered.
Yeah, I can testify to your availability. I remember when I had a client looking to purchase one of your buildings, I emailed your team. Within like 5 minutes, I had an email back, and it was you. And Howard was like, "Hey, when can I call you?" And I've never seen customer service quite like that.
I'm definitely a bit different in that I'm very hands-on. After being a realtor for 25 years, you learn to respond quickly, and you learn to be very
True.
customer service driven. And, I want to build a good reputation for my development company. And that's, I have to start from being involved, and I'm really from the ground up. I'm involved in picking the finishes. I'm involved in all the sales. Honestly, I'm probably going to come on color selection, the first two color selections. So I have to be involved at this point.
One other question in terms of what would you tell new property investors? Is there any particular pocket, neighborhood, region of the city that you think is a good up and comer, something like a Regent Park 10 years ago?
Okay, good question. So I just want to say it comes down to that per square foot and floor plan equation that I was talking about before. I have put together many, many deals in my time. I sold many units at Riverside Square. I sold many units at 90 Broadview, which is, I think, probably the best pre-construction deal I ever put together. But honestly, it wasn't just because of those areas and how I felt about them developing. It was about those areas, but about the price per square foot at that time relative to the rest of the market. So I will speak to some areas shortly, but I'm less about areas for investors. I'm more about value. And if you can get value, you're always going to make money on rent and purchase more money than in other places. So for years, people have been saying, I want to buy pre-construction on the subway line. And I would say, that's great, except that the subway line is going to cost you twice as much, let's say, as being at Queen and Dufferin. I get asked about the buildings on Lisgar sometimes, the urban core buildings. And, I get asked about, the buildings on Sudbury. And I do say to people, there's issues with those buildings. They're not as nice as some of the other buildings. However, you're paying less. So I define value as what you get for what you pay for. And to me, the best investments are the best values. That being said, what areas do I like at the moment? I do think that as you go towards Scarborough, some of those areas, if you can find something in the $1,000 square foot range, that'll be good. Danforth is going to be very good. I'm going to have a building on Danforth actually that will have very efficient layouts, and I think Danforth is going to develop a lot. The city has changed their urban planning policies so that we can have slightly deeper buildings, and there's going to be more commercial developed around there. So I think Danforth in particular is a pocket where you're going to see value. It's also on the subway line. Those are really the two areas that I see as developing the most, where the price points could be okay for people.
And you have units in the 1,000-foot range right now, do you not?
I do. So, it's interesting. The building, The View, which is in the Beaches, has an average size of about 1,200 square feet. So the end price is high. However, a lot of the north-facing units are in the $1,000 per square foot range. The finishes are fantastic, and it hasn't really been investor bought. I think it's a good opportunity.
Okay, I'll link that one in the description below. One of my favorite questions. Obviously, I don't do a lot of these interviews, but this is something I ask developers and people who are far ahead of me in their career. If you could go back and tell yourself one piece of advice right before you got into real estate or when you were very new in real estate, knowing what you know now, whether it's about investing, business, real estate, any of the above, what would that piece of advice be?
So I'm going to tell you a story. I think we've got a little bit of time, so
Yeah,
why not?
absolutely.
Here's a Condoman story. When I was in the middle of my career, so I'm going to say roughly 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I had decided that I wanted to sell for developers. It was something to me that seemed to be a great position for me. I wouldn't have to run around as much. I would have lots of inventory, and I would just brand myself that way. So every time I called up a developer, the developer would say, "Hey, I don't really know if we can have you do that, but if you can find me land that I can develop, I'm happy to buy it from you." So being who I am, I started driving around, looking for land in Etobicoke. They've got a bunch of motels. At least they used to have a bunch of motels where some of the high rises are now. And I
Humber
knocked on
Bay.
some of the,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I knocked on some of the motel doors. And I had met this elderly man. He was very nice. And he said, "Yeah, I'd like to sell. Here's my list." He gave me a little piece of paper with four, criteria. One of them was, no conditions. It was something very simple. It had his price on it. And you could tell he was not a sophisticated seller. And I think his price at the time was $3 million. That's a joke. It was a location where it was very likely that you could build 36 or 38 stories or whatever it was.
Which site was this? Can you disclose?
Um, you know what? It's actually not built yet.
Okay.
But it's right. I think
that speaks to what we were talking about earlier about the city of Toronto.
in this case, I don't think it was a city. I think it was a developer slow playing it because they knew they'd make more money. Right. But it's right in that lakeshore cluster.
Okay.
So I go back to this builder, and this builder was already huge at this time. And I show him the piece of paper that this gentleman gave me, and I say, he wants $3 million. I don't think he's sophisticated. I honestly think you should just offer it to him. I did some very rudimentary math at the time. I didn't understand soft costs or anything, but I could see the profit was, $50 million or whatever. I'm just saying $50 million. It was huge.
Right.
And, the developer looked at me and he said, "Well, I'm going to write him an offer at 2.7, conditional on getting planning with the city for 6 months." And it was a pretty ridiculous offer relative to what this gentleman wanted.
Right.
So anyways, at this time it was a big deal. And I had put a clause in the offer saying Condoman Realty gets to sell, the development for this developer, which was the biggest deal to me of all of this.
Right.
So I go back to the old man. He goes, "Oh, I'm going to look at it and I'll take it to my lawyer and I'll get back to you." So 2 weeks later, I call the gentleman back. "Oh, I took it to my lawyer. It's not exactly what I wanted. So I can't take it." I go back to this developer. He's like, "Well, let's let him sit on it, see what happens." A couple months later, I follow up with this older man, just like that, on my own, just on my own. And I speak, "Oh, I just got an offer yesterday." And I asked him, I just said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "Oh, well, it's $3 million and it's the terms that I want." So I took it at face value, and I get back to the developer. Developer immediately ups his offer to, I think it was 3.8.
Right.
No conditions. And so I drive over to the old man. I say, I talked to the developer. He's become, much more aggressive. Here's this offer. I hope this is better. Anyways, a few more days go by, and I call up the old man. He goes, "Oh, well, I sent the two offers to my lawyer. The other one had a deposit I could keep, so I took the other one." So there was a non-refundable deposit, but and he took the other offer. But what I learned from this whole process was that at that time, developing was very, very cheap, and developers were even cheaper. So right. My advice to myself would have been to get into developing at that time rather than the time that I did.
Right. But I think there's something to be said too about building up your client database and getting to a place where developing becomes more feasible. Right. I would imagine even like our previous investors of yours who bought condos with you, maybe even LPs on sites that you do, or is that not a thing that you do?
Jordan, I'll tell you, honestly, I don't mind being very straightforward. I had a massive group of investors because I sold so many condos before. And then I sold a bunch of them at 1249 Queen. And then I had to go back to them and increase the price, which was not fun because I knew them personally. So that didn't bode so well. The building on the Danforth, I had people sign reservation agreements. It's now a different building. So that, didn't really bode so well. So, going back to that time, I think I would have got most of my ducks in a row and maybe gone investors together or whatever need be the case. Because what was really required to develop was money.
Yeah.
Looking back, the market went up so much. Money was the biggest driver, and the city was faster at that time.
And margins were better, much easier to go through.
Margins were much, much better. Had I been able to sell 1249 Queen, had I been able to build 1249 Queen 2 years, in 2 years or 2.5 years, like it was supposed to be, it would have been clean. I sold it at $800 a square foot. My margins were fine at $800 a square foot. I would have been done, finished. That would have been it. But so it's not so.
Sorry, moral of the story here that I'm getting is essentially something I talk about probably far too much on my channel. That is, development's getting harder, not easier.
Yeah, well, there's actually two morals here. I'm going to extend this to something that's maybe more relatable to everybody. Is, it always seems like the opportunity was before, and it was, but the opportunity is still at the present. So do things when you can. That's not to say that today is 100% better than in 1 month from now, but it is better than never. So, you should always try and do things when the opportunity arises, because you don't know when that opportunity is going to arise next. And generally speaking, I would say, in my opinion, in the Toronto market, it's going to go up. And, you've got to, you got to take advantage of it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I remember passing up on a particular unit that I really liked at a condo that launched right at Kipling Station. It was $675 a foot, parking included. And at the time, I thought it was too much. So yeah, if you, second best time to plant a tree or whatever, it's always today. Yeah. So where can people find and follow you?
Good question. So if you go to Howard Condoman on YouTube, I've just started producing videos now. I honestly have like 3 followers or something, but I produce good
content. I'm one of the first 3.
Probably. I think I'm the second one, actually, from my other email. But the content's good, and I'm going to keep coming out with videos. And I'm talking like I am now. I don't mind, being straightforward about various topics. And I've had certainly a lot of experiences in this industry. So you can follow me there. You're welcome to email me at Howard@condomanrealty.com if you have any questions about any of my developments. But honestly, it's good for you to have your own representative. I recommend talking to Jordan, and he can certainly get you into my developments.
I recommend the same. Well, thanks for coming on, man. It's been enlightening, and I'm sure people will find value in this. So thank you again.
All right, thanks. Have a great day.
Cheers. So after I filmed this interview, I realized I didn't really give Howard much of a chance to plug his development, the View condo. So I want to walk you through it quickly here. This is the location, 507 Kingston Road, so south side of Kingston, just east of Kingston and Woodbine. Unfortunately, our 3D model doesn't have it, so I'll just pull it up here. You're north of Woodbine Beach. This is the location here. Small site, boutique product. You guys know I love boutique. It's 30 units in total, and they have a few left, and they're at good price points, around $1,000 a foot. I'll just walk you through it here. So this is the development fronting on Kingston here. This is the south side, the south facade of the building. So you can see here lots of terrace units, lots of really large units. Like I said, only 30 units. And what Howard told me is that all of the purchasers so far have been end users, people who intend to move in, which is actually nice from an investment perspective as well, because you know that there's going to be very low turnover in this boutique style building. Here's a rendering of the interior. So really high level finishes throughout. He's built this building with the end user in mind, and so the finishes reflect that. And the floor plans are really nice as well. So they're all large, right? If we take a quick peek at the price list here, you can see you're starting at about 1.2 million for 1,100 square feet, right? And that's on the 5th floor. And he is doing only 15% down prior to occupancy here. And you've got a lot of large townhomes and 2-story units as well. So just walk you through a couple of the floor plans. This is one that I really like. So this is a 2-story townhome unit. It's very wide, so you have a lot of linear feet of windows. So it's going to be a bright unit, and you have a massive 485 135 square foot terrace here as well. As you can see here, you've got the living and dining separated on the main floor, as well as a bathroom for guests. And of course, you have 3 bedrooms on the upper floor. Beautiful thing about working with Howard, as I can attest to, he's very flexible in terms of changes, upgrades, floor plans, modifications. And so he's a really good developer to work with from that perspective. And then you have this as well. This is a 1,300 square foot 2-bedroom. And this one's really nice. You got natural light in both bedrooms. You have, 2 full baths. And then of course you have a powder room for guests and a really open living and dining area with a large terrace that looks to the south. So these are some really good units. If you want more information on the view, you can go ahead and shoot me an email, or you can reach out to Howard yourself. That's it for today, guys. I'll see you guys next video.